everybody, it's Christy here, Snarky Wordsworth over on Instagram and Reddit, and today I have a pen review for everybody out there. Today we're going to be talking about the Benu Euphoria, specifically the Goulet Pens exclusive iced caramel latte version of the Euphoria. I actually pre-ordered this the second that I saw it available on the website. Prior to this pen, I had pretty much zero interest in Benu's pens. I thought, they're very pretty and really, really interesting looking pens, but the colorways were very vibrant, loads of glitter, shades from the rainbow that you wouldn't even imagine going together, but absolutely did. But that's just generally not my aesthetic. I tend to gravitate more toward neutrals, or at the most like more earthy tones, greens, blues, browns, things like that. And so Benu's colorways just really weren't sparking my interest. But then came this one, and good grief, this is such the perfect pen for me. Let's see if I can get it to show up a little bit better. Okay, and I just love the way this resin looks. I mean, everything from like the gradient going from that super creamy peachy pale tone through the latte color, and then of course like the brown, and that, I don't know if it's showing up, but it has like little speckles of glitter, so it's all metallic-y but not at the same time, and then these shots of gold glitter in the middle. I really, really love this pen. From the second I saw it, I was like, I have to have it, have to add it to my collection. I'm also a massive coffee fan, so it just spoke to me. So I got it and I was super thrilled. The second I opened the package, it looked like everything I wanted it to be. And it really is an excellent, excellent pen. So let me talk a little bit about the specs. If you are a small pen user, I would say give this one a shot anyway. It is a pretty large pen. Capped, it's 150 millimeters. Posted, it's 180 millimeters, which is pretty huge. And it's 26 grams overall. Now, as I mentioned, small pen users might balk a little bit at the size because it is quite a bit bigger than, say, a Pro Gear Slim, let alone a Kaweco Sport or something of that size. But it feels good in the hand. It's not overly heavy, and it doesn't really feel weirdly unbalanced, even if you're used to a smaller pen. I'm a pen poster, okay? So I almost always post my pens, but this is the one pen that I will write with and not have it be posted. Feels perfectly comfortable, not capped or not posted. But even if you post it, while it does feel a tiny bit back heavy, it's nothing overwhelming and that you can't write with. I know posting for me is just sort of a security blanket. I'm always nervous that the cap's going to go rolling somewhere and crack or break or whatever. So it does post well, pretty securely, and it doesn't feel overwhelmingly uncomfortable, even though it becomes outlandishly huge in a smaller hand. So it works. It doesn't matter if you post or not post. I still think it's a great fit pen. Some really cool options. It's of course a cartridge converter. If you use a converter, it's going to be 1.10 milliliters of ink that you can fit in here, pretty standard. But, and I haven't done this, but I am very tempted, you can eyedropper this because it's all plastic. I mean, there's no metal in here. And again, I have not tried this, so, don't take my complete word for it, but the websites do say it can be eyedroppered. And if you eyedropper this thing, you can get a whopping 4.97 milliliters in here. I mean, that's a crazy amount of ink. Like, I feel like I wouldn't use that much ink in several months' time just because I rotate my pens. But even if I was using this steadily, it's a lot of ink, like a lot. But yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. If you are somebody who is pretty dedicated to one ink, this is a really nice option. Even if you can't, see how much ink is in the body, because obviously no ink window, I don't think it's going to matter. Not when you're holding nearly 5 milliliters in here. Again, that's a crazy amount of ink. Now, if you purchase it online, and this goes, I believe, for most of the Benu Euphorias, you can get the nibs in the 3 standard sizes, fine, medium, and bold. This uses a Schmidt nib, and I've come to discover Schmidt nibs are great. If you like wet writers, good grief, these are very wet writers. So I'm pretty new to the Pelikan world, and I know this is a steel nib, and comparing it to a gold Pelikan probably sounds crazy, but this thing is so smooth when it glides across the paper. I mean, there's so little feedback. As someone who regularly uses sailors, it's almost a little bit uncomfortable for me just because it's so much ink and it's so smooth that I don't know, I kind of personally miss that audible bit of scratchiness. It's not, and of course, it's not scratchiness, feedback, like that pencil feel. There's just none of that. If you like that glassy, smooth, Pelikan-esque flow, I think the Schmidt nib is really, really excellent for that, especially when you consider that it is a steel nib. Let's piggyback off the nib thing, though. So when I first got this, I don't know, maybe I was taking crazy pills. I am an extra fine, and maybe edging into a medium nib user. And then I will frequently use stubs and cursives and italics. But when I'm just writing, and that was what I intended to use this pen for, I really like a very nice fine. I don't know what I was thinking, but I got a bold. And I'd never used a Schmidt nib before. And so I got the Schmidt nib, and as I mentioned, at the time, it was probably the smoothest nib I'd ever used. I'd not been into Pelikan at that point. I'd never tried a Pelikan, so I didn't have that experience. But again, at the time, I'd never had something glide across the page so effortlessly. But here's the thing. When you have a super wet, smooth writer, a lot of times the line is so broad that if you are a small writer, it becomes kind of difficult to write. And having watched a lot of reviews at the time, nobody really had addressed that aspect of things for me. So I did not realize that that was going to be a thing. Not that I didn't realize that writing, of course, with a broader nib means smaller writing is going to be harder or less clear and crisp, but that this nib was so smooth, so wet, and so broad that it was going to change things for me. So this is with the nib that I originally got, the Benu Euphoria bold nib. And here's the writing, like, for me, to say that it's legible and it was comfortable to write with, I could not fit it within that Hobonichi 4mm grid. I had to extend the letters a little bit beyond that. I had to skip lines so that things didn't run together. And then when I tried to fit it a little bit closer to that 4mm grid, which is still much larger than my normal handwriting, it was definitely a little bit messy. Certainly not something that I would like to see in my journals or my planners. Just a little too blended together, not enough definition. I didn't love it. So I figured this was my bad call. I didn't know what I was doing. Let's just get a Schmidt medium and then it'll be totally fine. So I did. And then the medium I found, incredibly smooth writer, super wet, beautifully comfortable. But even the medium was a little too wet for me, and it still made my writing just a little too large. I could not comfortably write notes within my Hobonichi weeks. I did not like it. And so I put the pen away. Like, this pen that I loved the look of, I just was like, well, at least I can periodically look at it, but it's definitely not something I can use. And then this last weekend, I went to the Ohio Pen Show, and I met with Kirk Speer, and he ground this medium nib down to a medium cursive smooth italic. Let's see, can I get, it's not really super focused, but this is a game changer for me. I love this nib now. Definitely no longer that smooth glassy experience. When you're playing around with italics, even if you cursive them and smooth them out, it's never going to be the same kind of, silky smooth flow that you're going to get with like a standard rounded nib, but I love writing with this thing. I've been writing with it pretty constantly for the last couple, like week and some change, and I'm obsessed. But yeah, I just really, really love this thing now. So everything matches for me at this point. My love for the way that it looks, my love for the way that it writes, the fact that, it's conveniently comfortable no matter whether I want to write with it cap posted or unposted. Just an altogether fantastic, fantastic pen. Just so we can kind of get an idea of how it fits with the other pens of my collection, I just want to do a quick size comparison. So hold on just 1 second for me. All right, so here you can see how the Benu Euphoria stacks up size-wise against several of the other pens in my collection. The Benu is actually the largest pen that I own, and I still really, really enjoy it. I definitely tend towards smaller or pocket-sized pens even, but this one, I don't know how they've made the design so comfortable, but I still love writing with it, even though it's much bigger than what I'm used to. And what's crazy is that I have friends who have much larger hands who are used to large pens who love the Euphoria just as much as I do. The fact that you can make a pen and have it work for so many different preferences is a pretty big deal, I think. Because while for me, a lot of times, like I said, I really like the smaller pen, my hand doesn't get tired. It's a completely different experience for so many other people. And again, speaks leaps and bounds for how well this Euphoria is designed. I'm going to go ahead and uncap these just so you can see what they all compare as far as size goes when they're uncapped. All right, so here you can see how they compare when they are not capped. You'll notice that the Euphoria is quite a bit longer than the Estie and the Glenmont, which were pretty similarly sized when they were both capped. I think that's probably why, at least in part, why this was so much more comfortable in the hand. Like, I won't write with the Estie or the Glenmont when they're not posted. So maybe that balance, even though it's pretty minute, is a big part of it. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I will say this is the only pen that I will write with unposted and where it feels really comfortable. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely the largest pen by quite a lot. That's nearly a centimeter, I want to say. So pretty big difference, but still incredibly comfortable to write with, even when you are a fan of smaller pens. So just something to keep in mind. And just if you have pens of similar size, how you feel writing with them, whether it be posted or not, hopefully you can glean from some information from there. Before I dive into the writing sample, I just wanted to show something really, really quickly. Earlier in the video, I talked about how small I usually write, and this is probably the best example. This is my everyday carry, my traveler's notebook. The insert I have in here is a 5mm dot grid, but you can see with my writing, there's a rather generous amount of space in that 5mm grid, and the writing is so small that initial broad nib it was so bad on the Tomoe River paper. It looked like a huge mess. You couldn't differentiate any of my letters. It was just not good. So I would definitely strongly recommend people who are tiny writers like me, if you go with the stock nib, definitely go with the fine. As mentioned, even when I dropped down to the medium, it was not working for me. It just wasn't. It was not a viable nib as far as my writing goes. So if I can send out one little piece of information, if you are a tiny writer, get the fine, and even the fine might be a little too big. Since I never sized all the way down to the fine, I wouldn't be able to tell you 100% that would even be enough to make tiny writing legible, but it would be a sight better than the medium or the broad nibs were. I can say that. Okay, so now that that's done, let's get to the writing sample. As I mentioned, Kirk Speer did an incredible job grinding this nib for me. I am so obsessed with it. I kind of want to get all of my nibs done this way. I mean, obviously I'm not going to, but I'd really like to see how my writing looks with a fine cursive italic from him, and that I might actually try and have done, but we shall see. Okay, so you can see an altogether very comfortable writing experience. I really am obsessed with the variation that this one shows. It's just really, really nice now. I don't really stress about making everything legible because even when I write quite a bit smaller, it works. And I don't hate the way my larger writing looks either, because I don't really enjoy the way my larger writing looks generally. So, you know, the fact that this can successfully make me comfortable no matter what size I'm writing in, big, big plus. But yeah, it's a really, really great nib. I really love it. Everything about it really, and it's just been such a delight to write with over the last several days. I can't put it down. It's been an absolute treat. So, if this video has been at all interesting, entertaining, useful as far as the information goes, please do consider hitting that like button or potentially even subscribe to the channel. If you happen to have any questions or comments, make sure you make those below. I would love to hear from fellow small writers if you happen to have experience with the Schmidt nibs, because again, I think it's a phenomenal nib. I just could not get the broad to really work for me. And then the medium was more of the same. I did not get to drop down to that fine. So I would definitely love to hear from anybody who has used the fine Schmidt nib. Is it worth it for me to try another Euphoria, especially with that fine nib? I'm definitely curious because it was a really nice, smooth experience. It did not look good with my writing style. If you've made it to the end of this video, you are absolutely awesome. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye-bye.